What do you like about your work?
What I like about my work is that every day is different, and I get to deal with a whole range of interesting and challenging scenarios on a daily basis, which allows me to have creative and intellectual input into the banking environment.
Okay.
Compliance can be seen either very in a narrow angle or very wide, holistic view of how it works with the banking environment. How I see it is my job to make it as easy as possible for the staff in a bank to carry out their functions in a manner that is in line with the regulatory framework and to provide the best possible outcomes for their clients.
Yeah.
When the compliance is done badly, it is obstructive, it acts as a roadblock to the business, or it creates a poor control framework, which can lead to the various reputational disasters we see for the banking industry over the past few years.
Yeah.
So it is my job to sort of see through the life cycle of the regulatory process and to ensure that the bank staff can properly manage this. So looking at this end to end, we would start with the the development of new regulation. So you can start on the sort of regulatory lobbying and development aspect of it. You can work with the regulators, with the supranational bodies. You can get involved in the lobbying and the crafting of new rules and regulations to ensure that these are done in a manner that is not going to be destructive for the industry that it's looking to regulate.
Yeah.
So this can involve speaking to politicians, lobbyists, industry groups. I've got happy memories of earlier in my career flying off to Brussels to go and sit in large theatre halls to try and discuss the finer points of EMIR and how that was implemented.
Yeah.
You can get involved with roundtables with the FCA to look at exact specific industry topics and how this is going to operate. So this is the very sort of start of the regulatory process. Then, once the rules have been written and they're coming into force, you can then work on the implementation phase. You work with your bank to understand what is being required of you and how you're going to bring that to life in the banking area. So this can involve significant projects. My example here would be MiFID II implementation, of leading a work stream on the implementation of commodity derivatives regulation. So for that, managing a significant multi-million pound budget, running teams of staff, trying to work out not only how to interpret and implement the rules, but also to actually go down into the technical implementation, working with the front office staff, working with IT, working with all the other various support functions and competence lines to ensure the proper implementation of the rules. Then the next step from there is, well, at least in my current role, is to ensure the education of the staff to make sure that they are aware of the rules as they apply to them. So this can involve things like classroom training, development of web trainings, and other sort of direct face-to-face discussions with the sales and trading staff and branch management and bank management to ensure that they're aware of the rules and that they know how to manage themselves accordingly. This is often a two-way process, and the feedback from this can also then go back into the implementation process and also ultimately feedback to the regulators themselves.
Yeah.
So you have the development of the rules, the implementation, the education of the staff, and then moving on from there, you have the more commonly understood part of compliance, which is the control framework. So here you have the first level controls, ensuring that the desks are properly managed and make sure that they know what they're doing and they have proper oversight of their activities. You have the sort of second line of controls, which is where the compliance comes in, where it reviews and monitors how the business is building these controls. And this sort of creates your feedback loop, which then sort of develops into improving the project structures and how the controls are implemented. Beyond that, then you have sort of audits and higher level reviews, but really the compliance sort of captures this sort of middle part here, which is understand the rules, make sure that the people who have to abide by them know what they have to abide by, and then ensure you have the appropriate control framework in place. When it gets interesting, which is my role, I am advisory compliance. So it's my job to sit on the trading floor and react in real time to issues that the salespeople or the traders may have to ensure that in the second decisions can be made properly and in accordance with the control framework that's in place. not only in just the clearly hard-defined rules and regulations that are written, but also looking more from a holistic conduct risk point of view to ensure that every action is being taken with a client's best interests as the key consideration.
Yeah.
So you have both the sort of hard and fast rules. So we have to manage things like rules from the trading exchanges, rules that have been set out by the national governments and the local regulators, but then also the principle-based regulation, which we've seen from the FCA and other regulators to ensure that the conduct is the key thing. And what we've seen over the past 10 years is a development, or probably 20 years now, is the development of how the regulators have approached their role of looking after clients and ensuring that the financial sector operates efficiently. If we go back 20 years, back to N1, I think it's 2001 now, it was very much a case of principles-based regulation, light touch, laissez-faire, and let the industry sort of figure it out for itself and manage its own obligations.
Yeah.
What we saw then was the sort of the financial the crisis of 2007 and a number of reputationally damaging incidents, such as the LIBOR manipulation scandals,
Yeah.
and various other subjects like this. So what we've seen there is that each time something like this happens, the regulators try and adapt and then sort of shift their views to how they want the regulatory process to work. And this sort of then filters into how they manage their strategic objectives. It's also changed the regulatory structure in the UK. So now the FCA is very much a conduct regulator, whereas the PRA is deals more the financial side of things, liquidity and the management of sterling and so on. So in the current environment, the regulators are very, very focused on conduct risk, how firms manage the relationship with their clients and ensure that a firm can't just say, well, I followed rules A, B, and C. We don't know how this happened to the clients. The client has to be the forefront of the thinking of the firms at all times.
Yeah.
And this has really been seen for the last couple of years. So after the LIBOR manipulation scandal, the FCA brought in, they changed how the senior managers of the firms are managed and dealt with from a regulatory perspective, so that they have to take personal liability for the conduct of their bank and their employees. So we really sort of work with the senior managers of the bank to ensure that you have a strong conduct framework within the bank and that the people are all sort of pulling in the same direction to ensure that the client is put at the forefront of everything. So again, how that feeds back to me, it means that I'm sat on the floor on a daily basis, working with the traders, working with the sales guys, working with the competence lines to ensure that we can continue to manage our business in an effective and profitable way, but at the same time dealing with the various expectations that are placed upon us.
Yeah. So how did you get started in this role?
So my undergraduate degree was in law, with a dissertation in the protection of consumers in the UK financial environment. So having produced my magnum opus on this, I took an entry-level role in KYC. So back in 2000, there was a number of remediation projects going on in the large banks, where there have been deficiencies in things like their anti-money laundering controls, the client due diligence, and so on. And they were taking on huge numbers of staff to come in and to remediate all the client records and deal with all the sort of the administration around the client documentation. After doing that for a few months, I decided to do a postgraduate diploma in investment compliance, fund management, and financial derivatives. So I did that over the course of 18 months while working for 2 different institutions in the city. Upon completing that, I took up another role at a firm that was just about to become regulated. So I took the opportunity to sort of go in at the start and actually help to build up the compliance framework from scratch in a new firm, which was obviously it's an exciting thing to do when you're getting in at the ground floor and looking to put your own stamp on things as well. So that was a sort of an interesting and challenging time given the nature of the firm that I was working in. So yeah, that was it really. The compliance gave me an opportunity to utilize sort of my legal skills and knowledge, but at the same time, having spent time studying the investment side of things, I completed the investment management certificate, spent a lot of time sort of shadowing the sales and the trading, it became sort of the obvious choice to go into sort of the advisory side of compliance.
Yeah. So, and what advice would you give to someone looking to start out in a career in compliance today?
Really, it's to try and understand what it is you want to do. There are various sort of lines of compliance you can go into, whether you want to sort of deal with anti-money laundering and financial sanctions, you can go into monitoring and surveillance, you can go into regulatory change and development, or like me, you can go into compliance advisory, which is a role that I see sort of crystallizes all of these and at the same time gives you exposure to the front office of the bank. What, from my perspective, was I read. There are many books that sort of cover these sort of topics.
Yeah.
Seek out people you can speak to. It really, really helps if you can make contacts so that you can understand what people are doing in the role, so that you can get an understanding. Network. Same with any job in the city. You need to make your networks, make your connections, and this will ultimately set you in good stead for the duration of your career.